Hello, everyone.
Good day, colleagues.
Hello, everyone, and
Uh,
welcome. We are so glad that you're here. Welcome to our monthly webinar series of the UNESCO Chair on Intercultural Competence based at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And we are so glad to be joined by colleagues from all over. And we invite you to please introduce yourselves in chat. We'd love to know where you're coming from today. Um, So again, welcome. And just a couple notes about logistics. This is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our UNESCO Chair website once that website gets back up. Stellenbosch just went through a refresh of their website. And then also, if you have any questions during this time of the webinar, please do type those into chat, and we will have a time for Q&A at the end of our speakers sharing with us today. And so we look forward to the discussion that will follow. So my name is Darla Deerdorf. I'm the UNESCO chair holder on intercultural competence here at Stellenbosch University. And I am joined by a whole core team of colleagues, and you'll see them listed there on the screen. And Dr. Prisha Simba will be introducing our speaker today and facilitating the question and answer later. And then you also see other colleagues listed there. We have another co-chair, Divani Ajitu, who's based at Durban University of Technology, and then the rest of us are based at Stellenbosch. You also see the URL for our website and our email where you can contact our team. And we invite you to get involved in the work of our UNESCO chair, including with UNESCO Story Circles. This is an intercultural methodology that was piloted by UNESCO in all 5 UNESCO regions around the world, and our chair is now taking it out across South Africa and the continent and globally. And in fact, I'm actually here in Japan right now, where we've been involved with doing story circles training here in Japan and working with another UNESCO chair here in Okayama. The purpose of UNESCO Story Circles is to practice key intercultural competencies such as listening for understanding, which we don't do often enough as humans, and instead listening to react. And you'll see other information here on the slide about story circles. It's all available in an open access manual in at least 7 different languages, as well as a 2-minute introduction video. So we encourage you to take a look at that. And then just to note that our chair is focusing on 3 key priorities related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is looking at the intersection of intercultural competence with peace building, with gender equality, and with climate action. And so our monthly speaker series will focus on one of those 3 areas. And so we're looking forward to hearing what our speaker has today to say about that. And through all of this with the monthly webinar series and also an annual intercultural conference, our chair is wanting to amplify African voices and perspectives around intercultural competence because so much of this work has come from Europe and North America, including my own, and we must learn from perspectives beyond those 2 regions of the world to understand more fully what it means to get along together as humans. We do have an invitation for you. We hope all of you will join our partner, World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence. You'll see the URL there, www.iccglobal.org. It's completely free to join. And you just fill out the brief member form and then make sure you make your way to World Council's online platform called Linker. There you'll find over 20 different working groups, including ICC and Africa Working Group, which always holds its meeting 1 week following our webinar speaker, so that we can have much more of a discussion with the speaker. So please join us next week in the ICC and Africa Working Group to continue today's discussion. So we look forward to working with you through the World Council as well. So With that, it is my honor and pleasure to turn this over to one of our co-chairs, Dr. Precious Simba. She is a professor in education at Stellenbosch University, and we are looking forward to having her introduce today's speaker and facilitate the Q&A that will follow. And again, a reminder to please, first of all, introduce yourselves if you're just joining us, introduce yourselves in chat, and then also post any questions you might have for our speaker in chat. So with that, over to you, Dr. Precious Simba.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me. Colleagues, greetings. It is an honor today to be the one who is introducing the next speaker. I know her from her work here at Stellenbosch, and we were part of a fellowship together. So I actually consider her to be a good friend. So that's why it's such an honor to present her bio and introduce her to our community today. I see a lot of people from the conference. Hello, welcome. I'm hoping for a lot of that energy from Morocco is going to be there today as we listen to Professor Malgas, who is talking to us. So Rhoda is a scholar at Nelson Mandela University, School of Natural Resource Science and Management at the George campus, with a focus on sustainable natural resource use and biodiversity conservation. Her work bridges the gap between ecological science and community-based natural resource management. She has a PhD in conservation ecology from Stellenbosch University, where she was until just a few years ago. We're not too pleased about that. And she also holds degrees in botany, environmental science, and archaeology from University of Cape Town, which have primed her for a career in transdisciplinary scholarship, taking a socio-ecological systems lens as informed by her own heritage, which was informed by her own heritage in Fynbos landscapes to her research. Professor Malgas has a deep commitment to understanding the intricate relationships between people and their environments, particularly in the context of South Africa's rich yet vulnerable ecosystems. So her research explores the sustainable use of wild harvested species, the endurance of socio-ecological systems, the role of indigenous knowledge in conservation practices. She has supervised and been involved in several interdisciplinary projects that aim to integrate traditional ecological knowledge with modern conservation strategies, fostering collaboration between academic institutions, local communities, and graduate students. She is a very passionate educator, dedicated to mentoring the next generation of environmental scientists, especially those who are first generation graduates, which is something that is very, very important within the context of South Africa. She has published in many peer-reviewed journals and continues to contribute to local and international conferences. I believe she was keynoting just a short while ago. So it is through her research, teaching, supervision, and outreach, she continues to make contributions to the field of natural resource management and conservation, with a particular emphasis on sustainability and community engagement in Southern Africa. So this is it's quite an honor to receive her today. And as you can hear from her professional bio, she has a wealth of experience, transdisciplinary experience in her field. Today, she's going to be talking to us about Ubuntu in nature, tugging at our knowing strings. Colleagues, help me welcome Professor Rhoda Malgas.
Thanks, Precious. Thank you very much. And in my university, I haven't met Professor yet, so please just call me Rhoda. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much to those of you, the organizers, for this wonderful opportunity. I just want to share my screen with you and I'll get going straight away. Let's hope that that works like that. I will just put it in presenter mode. There we go. So,
Perfect.
yeah, thank you. All right, well, so I'm a conservation ecologist, and Precious mentioned earlier that we met through this scholarship that we were part of at Stellenbosch University. I think it started around 2018 or so, and that resulted in a book. And when I was preparing for this presentation, I just was thinking about grounding myself in what it is that this chair is responsible for. I'm sorry. And also what the aims and objectives are, as Dada was just explaining in the last minute or so. And I was reminded from your previous conference, I was going through the video from that conference, and these are some of the quotes from that video. I'm an African, and I'm proud to be an African, and I thought, yeah, I feel the same way. Talking about diversity and the diversity that Africa has to offer, and how important intercultural competencies are, given that we have such diverse populations, languages, religions, just on the African continent. This person at Stratmore was talking about how important cultural competencies are for self-identity, and how it influences our worldviews, how we see the world. There was another person talking about how diversity and division are not just issues in one region, not just in Europe, not just in South America, in Africa, all across the world. And that in many ways we face so many similar issues when it comes to these kinds of competencies. So these were just some of these quotes that kind of was grounding me as I was thinking about preparing for this presentation. And so it took me back to this book chapter that I wrote for this book that Precious was mentioning earlier. So we were invited as fellows of this program to contribute to a book project. And I was the only scientist who signed up for the fellowship. And so I had no recourse other than to reach for my ecological understandings of things. When we had to explore the topic, I came to realize that if I was going to write on the topic authentically, I had quite a serious disadvantage in that I have no linguistic connection to the word Ubuntu or to the phrasing in which it is implicit, Umuntu, Ngumuntu, Ngabantu. And without proper linguistic moorings, I wasn't sure that I would do a good job of actually saying something about Ubuntu in the book. But let me just bring your attention to this last bit. It says this phrase captures the essence of the Ubuntu philosophy, which emphasizes the interconnectedness and shared humanity of all people. Interconnectedness is something I do know something about. So I'm born and bred in Cape Town. I now live in George, which is about 400 kilometers along the southern coast. And as Precious was doing the bio, I just want to remind you that I live and work in the Cape Floristic region. And here are just a few fun facts about the Cape Floristic region. So all of you who are from this area, from South Africa, but especially these areas, you can be very proud that you are living in or come from one of the 6 global biodiversity hotspots in South Africa, in the world. We're said to be mega diverse, and that is because we have 9,500 plant species that are, and 70% of which are endemic to South Africa. They occur nowhere else in the world. Thank you. So this is quite a significant feat. And on top of all of that, our vegetation type in this part of the region accounts for 20% of plants on the entire African continent, but only on 0.5 of its land, so 5% of its land mass. So you've got 9,500 plant species crammed into 90,000 square kilometers. And so how do plants get along together in, let me add, a winter rainfall region? So in other words, for most plants in the world, they are thriving because they've got heat and rain and light at the same time. Our plants have not heat, because when it's summer, we have no rainfall, and when it's winter, they don't have light. So they really got a hard bargain being down here in the south of the continent. And yet, despite those kinds of difficulties, also, nitrogen and phosphorus are the two limiting soil nutrients. In these sandstone geological substrates, those two nutrients are in high demand, but there's very little of it. There's little supply. So these plants are up against the odds in quite a big way. And yet, it's those difficulties and the fact that they have found ways to live together in these 90,000 square kilometers that has resulted in an evolutionary sense to these 9,500 plant species. And remember, the landscape is not just populated with the plants. With the 9,500 plants come insects and microbes and amphibians and all of the other species layered on top. The plants obviously make the base of the entire food pyramid. So that's quite a big thing. And how does the fynbos do that? It does it through mutualisms. Plants have found a way to live together, not just with each other, but actually with other species in their environment, making the most of even the limitations in their environment. Now, these are the kinds of species that I work with. At the moment where I live now, honeybush is a big thing. I challenge you all to go and get yourself some honeybush after you leave this webinar. The plants are related to rooibos, which is in this picture over here on the right. But notice the yellow flowers. They have an interesting shape. And now both of these species, on the one on the left and the one on the right, are of Fabaceae, so they are legume plants. And both of them are used for tea production in South Africa. Both of them indigenous crops to South Africa, and both of them a source of livelihood for small-scale harvesters along the Cape Floristic region. Notice the flowers. The carpenter bee that pollinates honeybush tea has just the right morphology and just the right weight. It puts its front legs into the plant and it weighs it down with its weight while it's hovering, gets to the nectar, but actually as it dips in to get to the nectar, the pollen sits on its forehead and it pollinates. And that's how that relationship works. You do get what we call pollen thievery. So you get insects that do not have the right morphology. They can damage the plant, or otherwise they find a way to bore into the flower. They take the nectar, but they don't pollinate. And so they are not offering us a service. But the plants that are morphologically fit for pollination have just the right proportion of their body size and just the right weight to pollinate the honeybush tea. So there's one example. In the second example, this is Protea, a Protea species, widely used in the cut flower industry, exported to the United States and elsewhere. Interestingly, by the way, Proteas these are leaves. The beautiful pink part that you see are actually leaves. They're not flowers. And what is inside is actually, we call it a flower head. And in that flower head, you've got a whole populations of mites. And the mites are after the fungi. Now, the fungi grow inside those flower heads. The mites come after the fungi to feed on them. And that whole relationship between the mites and the fungi are regulated by birds. So there you've got a whole food chain, one flower head, showing how these species interact with each other. Quite remarkable. And then my old favorite, rooibos, which is what my career was built on many years ago. Here you see rooibos plants with quite long roots, and these roots are adapted to fix nitrogen, and actually also they can make structures called cluster roots that can exude acids into the soil. Those acids bind with phosphorus that's available in the soil, but then repackage the phosphorus and the nitrogen in a way that makes it available not only for the plant itself, but actually also for its neighbors around itself. Again, a remarkable example in the fynbos of how a plant looks after not only its own interests, but actually services an entire plant community with its special root adaptations in a nutrient-poor environment. So I think those are good examples of interconnectedness from nature that I think epitomize Ubuntu. Now, what about shared humanity? What can I tell you about shared humanity from this region? Now, my first degree many years ago now was actually archaeology. And when I moved here to George about a year ago, I was invited by a colleague at the University of New York to come and speak about plant and plant use to a group of international archaeology students from Africa and the United States who came to Oudtshoorn, just about 60 kilometers from us, to come and excavate this site that I had learned about when I was at varsity in the late 1990s, but that has now been reopened for excavation in just the last 1 or 2 years. Interestingly enough, this site is now also one of, I don't know if it's been declared yet, but the idea was to declare it along with 2 other UNESCO heritage sites in this region alone, such that the Southern Cape is now home to 3 UNESCO heritage sites. This is a picture from not George itself, but a little bit further down the coast towards Plettenberg Bay. And please note the date down there. Just saying something about the importance of this region in the contribution to evolution of an anatomically human species from here. Okay, so in that regard, this part of the coastline is extremely important in terms of heritage and paleoscience, given the populations that used to stay here and that gave rise to anatomically modern humans. And here's the cool story. This thing about interhuman connectedness. Isn't it amazing to know that no matter all of us in this webinar right now, no matter what country we've signed in from, no matter what languages we speak as a first language, no matter what culture, religion we subscribe to, all of us have common ancestry that actually comes from right down here, closest to which I'm situated. And just from this little plug here, this is from a website, but supported by the work of paleontologists here in South Africa and in the United States. This part of the world had once been submerged under the sea. So in drier, well, that's now submerged, sorry, but there were drier times in our history when this bank, the light blue part, was entirely exposed off the Agulhas Plain. And that part that was exposed would have been grassland, and it would have supported species that are now no longer found here anymore. And it would have had entire habitats, the archaeological and paleontological evidence of which is still in the landscape. A small group of people survived here for a very long time, ended up making the exodus from this region out into the rest of Africa and then eventually out of Africa, and eventually returned, such that in the end we had the San people well, in some circles called First Nations peoples, and then the Khoi following after that. But just to say that this region is so rich in paleontological evidence and archaeological evidence, and yet shows that we have common ancestry, all of us, which I think is a great imperative for intercultural competencies. So some reflections for me from these 2 disciplinary points of view. The idea that Ubuntu acknowledges not only my existence as some of those plant species I just showed you, but it actually means that by implication, we also honor the other, because without them, we are not who we are. And what that also does is, if you flip that around, is that it means that I exist for you, and without you, I don't exist. And so there's a mutual reciprocity in the relationship. It reminded me this, I live for you. I just wanted to relate this in another working group, again through Stellenbosch University. I met a Sotho professor, and she was telling us how in African languages, the way people greet one another obviously has meaning. It's not just like, how's it, or hi, or whatever, there's meaning in it. And she was saying that she grew up in a multi-generational home. And when the elders got up in the morning and they found you, a teenager, in the house, lurking about or still sleeping or whatever, and when they greeted you, there was this long greeting. And the gist of the greeting was, who do you live for? Culturally, the response to give was, I live for you. In other words, as a younger person, I defer to you as my elder, and my life, I understand, is bound up in yours, and so indeed I live for you. I thought that was a beautiful story, in a world where oftentimes, greed and pace and other things push for our value systems. This idea that you may well live for someone else who may indeed be a stranger to you is quite a compelling one. And then, based on archaeology and paleontology, we also have impetus for intercultural competencies, given that we actually, if we go far enough in our lineages, have common heritage the world over. There's no culture that is excluded from that. And so, to my mind, from a philosophical point of view, these are foundational ideas for why one wants to adopt intercultural competencies and advance the kinds of work that you are doing through the chair and in our university communities, but also elsewhere in our lives and so on. There are those quotes again. And again, when I was reflecting on it, to my mind, these are some of the ways that I understand not just Ubuntu, but also another concept that I would like to put forward here. So Africa has all these examples of diversity and ways of being and living together. But from my archaeological training, here's an example from Cape Town. And actually, when I was putting the slide together, I realized that this might have been one of the biggest multicultural series of events in South Africa that actually I don't think a lot of people know about. What you have here is a group of photos on the right side of your screen. Willem Bleek and his, I think it was his sister-in-law, Lucy Lloyd. Now, they lived in Mowbray in the 19th century. And when they lived there, they found that when they were walking on the streets of Cape Town, there were groups of people that were working through the prison system. So the prisons were where these people were coming from, but their labor was being used to build infrastructure in Cape Town at the time. And Willem Bleek was a linguist, and he heard that this language that these people speak to each other is very different from any languages he'd heard elsewhere. And out of his curiosity and in the further work of Lucy Lloyd, what happened was that they penned down the languages of San people who were being captured further north and penalized for things like what was framed as livestock theft, trespassing, and so on and so forth in an increasingly legalistic colonial landscape. These people are fleeing north, trying to get away, but then are dispossessed in all kinds of ways. There are massacres that take place, and those who are caught are brought to Cape Town and imprisoned at the Breakwater Lodge, what is now called the Breakwater Lodge prison, that precinct at the waterfront. So they record their languages. And not only do they record their languages, they also record their stories. And what you see here is a collection that has been put together through the UCT Fine Arts Department, together with the Archaeology Department, in curating this information. So there's a whole rich online library now of stories that come from groups of people who no longer occupy those parts of the landscape, but who still do exist. And that gives us great insight into how Indigenous people at that time thought. It gives us insight into their cosmology. And this is another source for me these days of thinking through the work that I do now with Indigenous peoples around environmental science, but also ethnobotany. And some of the things that I learned in my archaeology training and that I'm kind of looking into these days is this idea of thinking strings. So that you'll see that was part of my topic, of my title. Now, in science and cosmology, what are these thinking strings or knowing strings? So it's the idea that when in shamanism, people go into trance, that there are these lines that come off them, and there are actually rock art sites in South Africa that depict these lines coming off the person. And they believe these to be lines that connect them to other people, to other beings. They've also got a very fluid idea of people and animals. So there are stories, the creation story, for instance, in sand cosmology that starts with an eland that is a person, and the praying mantis that is a god. And so you can just see the connections. There's all kinds of connections that in our Western ways of thinking just are not, doesn't even occur to you. So these thinking strings connect people to each other, connect people to ancestors, connect people to stars, and stars to the moon, and the moon to the sun, and the sun to the animals, and the animals to the earth, and the earth to the people, and so on and so forth. So these thinking strings are something that I've been thinking about, and it got me to thinking when I was doing this work with the Ubuntu book chapter. This idea of interconnectedness and shared humanity of people, yes, great principle, absolutely. And then the sand cosmology pushes one a little bit further to say, and what about the kind of relational ontology where knowledge and memory are distributed across beings and landscapes, including animals and all the other things that we have labels and names for in English, and it doesn't sit with an individual, but is distributed across all these ways of being in the world. And here's just a small quote from a paper that was published in the late 1990s. How in sand cosmology the world works. So the ordinary world, which is the world we live in, because they also distinguish the ordinary world from other kinds of worlds, has nodal topography studded with campsites, hunting grounds, and what Jinkwasi call ngoresi, bundles of relationships and obligations between animals, beings, people, places, plants, and things. And so, to my mind, when I'm out in the fynbos, this is a field site where I've been working in Oudtshoorn over the last few months with a student of mine. When we're out in the landscape like this, to my mind, these are the best examples of Ubuntu and knowing strings that I can think of, that I also feel quite privileged to be able to connect with, because in my own family, we've managed to maintain our knowing strings in many ways through oral history. And there are many people for whom I know this is not the case. And so I understand this to be a real privilege. But these are some of my thoughts about how I experience these interconnectedness across ways of being in the world. And that has also opened my own westernized mind to things in my own heritage that I can go back to find inspiration for how I deal with my students and the things that I do here at the university. And so, yeah, that's my offering to you about intercultural connectedness from the landscapes that I deal with. And I don't usually give talks like this, it's quite philosophical, there are no graphs in it. But I hope that that it also tickles your imagination and inspires you to think about your own knowing strings. Thank you.
Wow, Rhoda, that was incredible. Incredible. Having little side chats with people. So just how incredible this talk is. I see that there are already 2 questions. I always come with mine, but I think I'll privilege some questions from our community. There's one from Margaret where she's talking about, she says, I think Ubuntu involves looking out and caring for each other. So as the people who are getting teas, food, and medicines from these over 9,000 species, how do they culturally ensure that they exist? So how do they not deplete them? So I think maybe it's a conservation question, that one. And then there was another question linked to, I think it's also linked to conservation, but they were drawing on that during the pandemic, this is more of a comment, I think, during the pandemic in Senegal, a lot of people turned to plant life for medicines, and this actually helped them to protect themselves and cure, even in some instances, cure themselves from the pandemic. And they're saying that the majority of the population has, even up to this day, not been vaccinated. The healers were the heroes. So Ubuntu can be seen to be relevant there. But maybe if you can address I think this one draws squarely on your work, this idea
Yes.
of conservation. What do we
Yeah.
learn from the indigenous communities?
So on the exploitation side, indeed, the species that have commercial value are overexploited in the field. Not all of them, and not all of the time. My position is that, and oftentimes people are vilified for being the cause of those acts of overexploitation. Now, I have heard arguments on both sides over the years as I do interviews with people and read the work of other colleagues. In some ways, there's the argument of, well, the land was taken from us, so do not stop us now from taking what is ours. Or other narratives like the land was ours, the border for Cape Nature used to be on that side, and then they encroached on our part. So actually, when I go over the fence to get what I want, I'm not illegal. I'm actually just getting what's mine. Then there's the fact that people had been excluded historically by conservationists. With this fortress idea, we'll separate the people from the plants and actively break ties between people and the plants that they use. And so there are all these historical narratives that make exploitation how it is framed today. My position when I come to a place like George or Calitzdorp or anywhere else, I first assume that the person I'm talking to is a custodian of the wild resource. There's generational history in this region, but also elsewhere, where there are generations of harvesters that have harvested from sites over many decades that prove the point, like Ostrom did with her own work internationally, that there are institutions, in other words, rules and rules of use that can be in place for very long periods of time that can sustain these species over generations. This is true. And I always meet the harvester on the premise that that is what they're trying to do. That's not to say that there aren't what I call cowboy harvesters or people out to exploit or just trying to make a quick buck. This is also there, yes. But I must say the people that I have dealt with over the years have predominantly been people who have considered themselves to be custodians of the wild resource, understand that despite their own economic and livelihood pressures, they cannot take out the entire population or cannot sell all of it. I've really met somebody of that penchant of I'm taking it all and it's burn baby burn. I've not come across people like this before in my career. So my position is always that I'm talking to a custodian, and until they prove me wrong, I treat them with the kind of respect and honor that I think a custodian deserves for having kept these plants in place for all of us to enjoy, to study, to use. And so exploitation is a real thing, yes. But I think that one can position oneself in a particular kind of way to work with the people who ultimately are the custodians of the resource.
Mm. Mm. I had a question, and it's a very selfish question. I'm so sorry to the community. It's a research-related question.
Yes.
How does having all of these different backgrounds, archaeology, botany, how does that affect the way that you engage with your conservation work now? Because I know you're saying, oh, I don't have the linguistic range, but scientifically, I think you have the scientific range to tell a far richer story. But how does that change the way you do research now, from somebody who just came up through conservation, for example?
Thanks, Precious. And something that I've only had the space to reflect on since I've been here at George. Because when I came here, people obviously didn't know me. At Stellenbosch, I had a particular profile. I was there for 15 years. And so I didn't, yeah, it wasn't such a thing. But then moving to this landscape, engaging on honeybush, and then living so close to these archaeological sites, suddenly that kind of switched on my archaeological brain again. And I'm like, oh, of course, yes, I do have that qualification and I can do this and I can do that. And that professor who invited me, I spent that whole day on that site, and it all came back to me. I mean, this is like from 20 years ago, and it all just came back. And I realized that I could understand the chemistry, the geology, the soil science, the plant things, the zoology, the environmental science, it all just came. What we put into disciplinary, groups of subjects suddenly just came. And I thought to myself, I wonder, isn't it like this for all things, isn't it? When we come into whatever research we are doing, you come with your whole self. You're not just a chemist or just an anthropologist. You also come with your religious beliefs and your background and who you are as a person in the world. And so for my classes, I think this multidisciplinary perspective makes it easy for me to step into a class. By the way, but actually I'm the minority in every class I've ever taught. And I say to my students, bring yourself, man, bring yourself and come be in my class here. And like bring your family with you into my class and come, when we talk about indigenous foods, tell me what granny told you, tell me what uncle so-and-so did. I think this multidisciplinary perspective has given me not just language for interdisciplinary work and research, but it's also given me a heart to say to my students, and this is all of who I am, now you bring all of who you are, and let's learn together. And I take that attitude in all my teaching. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you. There's another question here. Someone's saying hearing insightful. So I'm not sure if you can see the emojis that are going
Yeah.
up, like lots of hearts, and I mean, people are just going crazy over this.
Thank you, guys.
Somebody is saying that hearing insightful presentation from Dr. Rhoda Malgas, and they say Africa itself is a diverse, multicultural, multilinguistic continent, as far as I know, but very less knowledge about this continent, that there isn't. One query, if time is available, how about African indigenous communities and development concepts and FPIC? I'm not sure what that is. Some, if you're there, maybe you can elaborate on that one. And then they later on say, and I would love to know how about the promotion, safeguarding, and transmission of indigenous people's knowledge to sustainable development? What is there work being done there? If you can comment from your experience, maybe in South Africa and even beyond, is there work being done there?
Yeah. I'll answer the second question first, because that's a little bit more technical, and then I'll get to the diversity in Africa. And yeah. Okay, so there's actually legislation in place and a big government, the Afrikaans word has not just come. Effort to big government effort to not just so that when people give their knowledge, that knowledge is not exploited further than it already has been for generations. I must say I didn't keep track of that legislation because I then kind of moved over into access and benefit sharing, which is where more of my focus has been over the last little while. But the idea was to create a central database in South Africa where people could contribute their local knowledge, and it would be vested with IPs, intellectual property rights that people could then use and protect themselves against exploitation. I must say I haven't looked into that again. It's a very complex thing because you've got people sitting with oral knowledge that is not written down. Once it's written down and if it's in the public domain, anyone can use it, and people can then commercialize it without any access and benefit sharing, which is why the access and benefit sharing legislation since 2017 has come into play. So South Africa is a signatory to the Nagoya Protocol, and under that protocol, First Nations people or people recognized to be indigenous and who have whose knowledge is framed, I say framed because they're all kind of legalities and technicalities that go with it, but who are framed whose knowledge is framed as contributing to the development of those species or the knowledge of those species, they should be benefited. So access and benefit sharing legislation is firmly in place. And South Africa, mind you, has been the pioneer in this regard. We're the only country that has signed access and benefit sharing agreements for rooibos tea, for honeybush tea in 2023, for buchu in 2023. And just 3 weeks ago, almost to the day, for honeybush. So we have 3 access and benefit sharing agreements in place with biotrade industries in South Africa that benefit Khoi and San people and people who identify like that through the Khoi and San national councils in South Africa. We're the only country to be able to claim that. In terms of diversity in Africa and the knowledges, I can tell you what I do as a researcher, and that I encourage all of you to do who are researchers who do work where you interview people and solicit their information for your degree purposes or papers. Since my PhD, part of which I conducted in my grandmother's village, I made a choice that from now onwards, I would not interview elders without having them invite someone who is in their circle of trust that they would like to have the knowledge passed on to. So let's say I wanna interview Precious. I say, Precious, thank you for the time, but can you please invite somebody that you trust and who you want to be a knowledge bearer after you to please join us for this interview? That way, when I come away, somebody in the family, in the community, in the neighborhood, in the whatever, has heard what I've heard, and it's not just accrued to me, but it is now being passed on in a way that satisfies that elder. So there are small things we can do to, just on an ethical principle, to ensure these things outside of our ethical clearance at the university and outside of all the protocols. There's a human way that we can do these things that honor the elder and also the knowledge that they bear. So I just wanted to mention that example. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I'm just going to post something in our chat here because the San people have a code of ethics that they published.
Yes.
If you're interested in doing any research work with Indigenous communities here in South Africa, that might be of interest. Yenziwe, you had your hand up. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Precious. Hi, Rhoda. So good to see you again.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you for the lovely, lovely talk. It was nice to hear this rendition of you speaking about the work that you do, but from an Ubuntu and a philosophical context, although you're a bit nervous about it. I think you did so well. I just wanted to ask though, and this might also be philosophical again, but what would you say you've learned from just the natural order of how plants interact with one another? You mentioned at the beginning of your talk that you, in a space where these different species that have different adaptabilities find a way to make it work with each other and with the species around them, whilst also thriving themselves. Do you think in terms of intercultural competence, there's a space that maybe humans can learn something from plants they can apply to humanity and how they channel Ubuntu and just learn from these different species that make it through difficult conditions or difficult environments without tarnishing other species' livelihoods? Do you think there's something we can learn about that from plants, maybe?
Yes, I do think we can. And I must also add to a point, because species do outcompete each other. You've got species like alien invasives that entirely take over and entirely colonize a landscape and then become a fire hazard for people and for the other plants, and in fact, make it virtually impossible for those indigenous species to come back. So I think in learning these lessons, one thing to do is to not romanticize how it works, because competition and those other vices in our humanity are also present in these plant communities. I think there are positive examples to be learned from humans and from plants that can help us to overcome these things. And another essential difference that I always say about people is that we have cognitive capacity. A plant that is stuck with an alien invasive doesn't have a choice but to take it over because it's chemistry and molecules and other things. We are the species with the human with the cognitive capacity, frontal cortex development, and all of that, to look at someone and say, to look at the person in front of them. Maybe that's what I want to say. To see you, Yenziwe, but not to see all young Black South Africans in one person over whom I have a value judgment, but to see Nziwe, to look you in the eye, and to know something about you and to connect with you, that is something that plants don't have, that we do have. And I always think that as the human species, we have the capacity, but also the responsibility to make use of that cognitive capacity. It is what sets us apart from every other species in the world.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much. I agree so much. I'm sorry to like take more of the time, but Precious and I have had numerous discussions about we maybe never use so many words as romanticizing ideologies and philosophies of Ubuntu, but I think it's so important that you've stated it that way, and understanding context and understanding the fallibility of human beings. Yeah, it's very important. Thank you so much for sharing, Rhoda.
Thanks, Nziwe. So lovely to speak to you again.
Fantastic. We have, I think I'll take one more question. I see, Carolyn, you've had your hand up for quite a while. Please go ahead. Kindly unmute yourself.
I had a little trouble finding my mute button, but I put a question in the chat, but I wanted to speak it orally since I see I have the opportunity to do so. First of all, I really love the idea of the mutuality of plants. That was so inspirational and enlightening, and especially since I am a gardener, so I really, really appreciated that. But my question concerns Ubuntu, and considering the fact that it has this extraordinary power, potentially, I would like you to address how we could use it for the betterment of human society.
Yes. Yes. You know, when you formulated your question and you said, how can we use it? I'll tell you what my off-the-cuff response is in my head. My off-the-cuff response is just live it. Just be that. Just be it. You know, just if you, I don't know, I think in the way, I don't know if it's true for all African cultures, but certainly in the way that I think about this, we are all interconnected, and I think that interconnection is implicit in our understanding in many of our African cultures, and I know it's also not just African cultures, many other cultures across the world. I do think that the law of attraction is a true thing in Newtonian physics and in the human condition. If we are, if you look at someone and you can see that they're shut down from you, then I doubt that you have any inclination to open yourself up to that person for conversation. Just think about a conference or, you know, an engagement of any kind. And so I really think it's a matter of just seeing the person in front of you. See the person in front of you. And if you see the person in front of you, you're already practicing Ubuntu in your interaction with that person or with your plants. And if you open yourself up like that, I think it just works like that, that the law of attraction works, and you and you make space for someone else. You invite them to also experience and reciprocate Ubuntu. And of course, not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to be invited into your space. Not everybody cares that you are trying to be a person in the world who's trying to change the world. I think part of the yeah, maybe that comes with maturity, understanding that sometimes you need to shake off your sandals and move on. You can't make people do anything, but you can be open to and attract what you want in the world. And, you know, yeah, I think you can't use it so much as be it. I think that's how it works. Yeah.
May I respond, if I may, if I
Please,
have time?
yes.
Because I really adore what you said, and I think that what you said probably obtains with regard to all of us here. And I think we all practice what you just said. But my concern is, how do we reach those people who do not have the capacity to be humane and kind and generous to other people? I mean, research indicates, in terms of us versus them literature, that we can be precisely what you said within our group, but the difficulty is moving from us to them. And that's the thing that troubles me. But I'd like your answer.
Well, I think the thing about us and them is that we are them and they are us. If you come at it from that perspective, I think it already positions you a little bit differently. That's the one thing. I will never forget at my church, before I left Stellenbosch, our pastor had invited Professor Gobodo, Madigizela Gobodo, to come and speak about race and racism in not just in Stellenbosch, but in South Africa. What I really appreciated about how she positioned it, she said, she was telling us the thing about an apartheid. Somebody was responsible for very, very bad atrocities during the apartheid regime, and who was in leadership of those horrible, horrible things that happened. And this man had a breakdown of sorts at a book at a book signing, and because he realized how hated he is in today's society for what he had done. The audience was booing him. It was a very reasonable response given what he had done. There was a black woman who stood up and went to go talk to him. And the two of them ended up crying in each other's arms. For me, I don't know what happened between them. She just related this little story, but for me, that just, it broke my brain. How that is radical. That is a radical Ubuntu response. He needed it. She saw that, she responded. She had what it took to do it. It is, I don't know. There's something about that woman's capacity to have been able to do that. That for me, I try to aspire to. I don't know if it's for everyone, but if that is the highest that we can try to aim for in service of someone else, I would like to think that no matter who is standing in front of you, you can see them for the person that they are first. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. I will take one more hand. Akush, you've had your hand up for a very long time. But this will be the absolute last person that we take. I can see that everybody is really getting into the conversation. Akush, if you can try and, who's a member of our team, try and keep it succinct and to the point, and we'll ask Rhoda to respond.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Precious. I have more of a comment rather than a question. And I just want to really appreciate Rhoda for your insightful conversation that you've invited us to be a part of today. As someone who does research on gender-based violence and sexual violence, sometimes it can be very difficult to live Ubuntu or to see the other human that commits such heinous crime against another human being in a humane way. So, hearing you say live Ubuntu and be an example of that gives me hope, like in my research, because some of the participants sometimes would say, yes, he may have done A, B, C, D to me, but at the end of the day, he's still human. And in an African context, there's no such thing as irredeemability. Every human being is redeemable to an extent. And if we continue to see that humanity in us, that we can all work to redeem each other and to call each other to the highest level of humanity, then we can possibly find way to coexist and lower the rates of gender-based violence. So I just wanted to thank you. It's not a question, it's more of appreciation of your work and how you link nature with our humanity in our everyday life. So thank you.
Wow,
Thank you.
thank you.
I think you've just taught us well.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we are a few minutes over time. I can see the emojis are coming over. I don't think I've ever felt chills while talking about plants. It could be a disciplinary thing, but I'm just saying, I've never, this is a first. But thank you so much, Rhoda, for this conversation. To our community, the conversation doesn't end here. Next week, Tuesday, ICC in Africa Working Group will be meeting and having a conversation again with Rhoda. There isn't going to be a conversation, it's just taking the comments, the questions forward and having a deeper conversation. And there's more time to do that. Unlike today where we have to cut off because I know that we are in so many different time zones. But thank you so much, Rhoda. Again, this will also be, the video will be up on our site and you can go back and engage with it and share. Is there anything else from the team before I thank Rhoda for the last time?
Just a note, there have been the registration link for Tuesday has been posted in the chat. So
Okay.
we look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday to continue the discussion. And also a save the date for our 2026 UNESCO Chair Conference, which moves around the continent of Africa. We were just in Morocco, and November's webinar will feature the keynote from the Morocco conference. So do join us then and be watching for details in the registration link. And then our 2026 conference, I posted the dates and location in chat. It's going to be the end of September, 28th September through the 1st of October in Dakar, Senegal. And so we'll look forward to seeing you all there and be watching for the call for proposals to come out and further details. So that's it from, at least from what I know. We look forward to seeing you all next week and in November and then next year in Senegal.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rhoda.
Thanks, Precious, and thanks again for the opportunity. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.